Hello. In this video, we're going to be talking about skulls part 2, so let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now, as we begin our discussion about skulls part 2, one of the things that we'll emphasize is just like the last one, and I suspect many of the bones videos will not so much be about the information on the screen. That'll just be up to you to capture. And I'll just be worried about stressing or emphasizing location, and in this case with the color-coded skull, the particular color you want to be checking out and focusing on, and in the information on the screen as opposed to just reading it to you. I'll highlight particular important things or maybe further explain, but you'll just need to just capture the information, and you might have to pause it because I won't talk long enough for you to capture all that, but you'll work that out. So let's begin our discussion here, and again, it's going to be another long one. As we mentioned last time we were in the first skull video, strangely enough, that the skull has more bones in it than anywhere else that has bones, and so that's the necessity for two long ones about the skull. But we're going to be talking about facial bones, as you can see here on the screen. And of course, the important thing to recognize about facial bones, or what we're talking about, is we're talking about things that don't have direct contact with the brain or the meninges. So we're away from the cranial part, and now we're down in here in the basically the front part, or what's right behind the skin and muscle. If we were to pull that away, we're talking about those. So a lot of things are going to surround the cavities. I shouldn't say cavities, that means cranial, or it could mean cranial, but the sinus cavities and things in that area, things around the jawline, and things that certainly give the structure to the front part of the face and nose. So with that, let's get started. All right, we begin by talking about the maxillary, and obviously what makes up the mouth, or the working parts of the mouth, or I should say the teeth lines is probably a better way of thinking about it. Is there's the two parts. The maxillary is the top part, and then the mandible is the bottom part, and we'll talk about the mandible here in a few minutes. So we're talking about the upper part, and it's not just where the teeth are. It's almost like an arrowhead, as you can see. It's the kind of the beige top part of the teeth area, but it works along through here. Okay, and I'm not pointing, I don't mean the lip and the skin, but the bones below that. Kind of works here and then out to what would be these the very first third of these, what you touch of these cheekbones, and then kind of up through behind the nose, not the nose bones here, we'll talk about the nasal bones, but what's behind there, the structure back there. So almost like an arrowhead type, or at least a top part of an arrowhead, or a triangle is probably a better way of saying it, but you can see it there with the teeth area dropping down. It kind of gives it that arrowhead look. So we're talking about that beige part in the top part of the skull. So a lot of that, and of course it's got foramens that were veins and blood vessels and nervous tissue. Nerves can work in there. It's got all those, and of course, and it's even got what we call the alveolar parts. That's the part that holds on to the teeth. The part that makes it difficult if you've ever had a tooth pulled or a tooth removed, they're in there pretty good, and it takes a pretty good force to remove those. That's why you really have to be numbed up, because for one, you're gonna pull a lot of nerves, and of course it's you got to really get numbed up, and it's ibuprofen afterwards to kind of help with that. But that's the section that we're talking about. Okay, the second part of this is we want to talk about the palate. That's the top part of the mouth, the hard palate, and that's part of what this bone structure is. And of course, there's conditions that a person could have if those don't form properly, that can lead to a little bit of speech disorder and things like that. But it's that upper part, and that upper part, the hard palate, is as it mentions, what allows you to eat food and breathe at the same time. So that part doesn't stop. We don't want to stop breathing at any time. Okay, and it also comes with, as with most things, comes with some sinus cavities, and you can see here that's a cutaway view of the side there. But right in behind these areas is where the sinuses cavities, and of course they work through with the mucus and all the things associated with the breathing or the sinus cavities and things like that. But that's where these particular ones lead into that area. Excuse the silence there. I had to adjust my screens for the next ones. Now, the palatine bone, this is again a really kind of a small one, and if you're looking at the diagram over there to the side, I reach for the mouse so I could show you too, but you can see the pink right in the center of that picture. So just to the left of that little point, or that little corner of the pink bone, which is the internasal concha that we'll talk about here in a little bit, it kind of covers a grayish, maybe a little bit of a brown, a grayish brown, behind it, right to the right of that blue. That's the palatine bone. It's kind of an L shape. It has a little bit of an L at the bottom. If you were like making a long top and just a little bit of the bottom part, that's where it is. But it's right there where that little pink overlaps on it. That's where that is. And again, it's part of the nasal cavity wall, as you can see there. It's got a nice foramen in it, again, to get blood flow, to get nerve tissue in there, and those important things. Okay, the zygomatic bone, this one you can feel, this is that cheekbone right here. That's part of that, and of course the very front of that kind of touches where the mandible ends, but that zygomatic, that's that bone right there that you can feel. And again, just got lots of important, it's got a foramen in there, of course, like everything, just to get the needed nutrients in there and resources. It's pretty interesting. Almost all these bones come with a foramen. I mentioned it yesterday. It's just amazing. One of the amazing things about the anatomy, study of the anatomy, is that those holes can form, and the nerve tissue, the blood vessels, they can all be developed and fit right through those without any real, obviously nothing. You don't have to do anything. It's just amazing to me that they can form, those capillaries and nerve tissue can form, and then also go through the hole, You would think that it almost takes somebody or something building it or designing it, but it just forms naturally. If you just, always want to remember that we start out as one cell way back after fertilization and develop from there. And then when the cells start developing tissue and the tissue developing into the organs or the bones and stuff, I mean, those things develop based on information from the DNA. And I don't know, it's just pretty amazing that that can happen so precisely. All right, next up is the lacrimal. And the lacrimal, you can see there's the smallest one, and it's kind of hard to point at. I almost have to take my glasses off to do it, but it's inside the eye socket, and it's just behind the nose, okay, and not behind the nose right there, but behind the nose, kind of on the back part of what would be the eye socket. If I could poke my eye out and take my glasses off, I could really point to it, but we're not going to go to that extreme. There's two bones that make up a particular area, and you can see them on the diagram. The red one is the lacrimal that we're talking about, and the green one's the ethmoid bone, and so it's kind of the front half of that section. So like the eye would be sitting, the inner part of the eye would be sitting against the lacrimal. That's where the tears, as you can see, the tear ducts collect there as well. But that's the lacrimal, the red section. Okay, next up to kind of point out is the nasal bones. I just realized that I included the text in the diagram. I take that out, and so I can make it look better and more presentable, but I missed on that one. So video editing 1, Stuart 0 on that one. But the nasal bones, now we're talking about these two bones that are right here. You can obviously feel those, and of course, as it says there, boxers and people in sports often, or just anywhere, you can get those broken with a pretty good smack there. And of course, you can do it in reality life. You bump into something or walk into something or in a car wreck or some kind of accident like that. But that's the bones that we're talking about here. And of course, they make that little apex, which leads right into the formation of the nasal cavities. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is the pink one, which I referred to earlier, the inferior nasal concha. And concha just refers to kind of a conch shell. If you know anything about what a conch shell is, it's the shells, the real big ones in the ocean. And of course, they spiral around inside of there, making those spiral cavities. And so that's where kind of the name comes from for the nasal cavities, because they are kind of grooved to where they make little passageways. Which is kind of why, when people have sleeping disorders or respiratory disorders, they kind of can wheeze, and that's just the air coming through those restricted or compacted areas. But we're talking about the pink there, so it's not so much the passageway we're referring to as the intranasal concha, it's the bone that forms that, and it's the pink one right there. And you can kind of see in relationship where the nose it is, so it's going to be straight back from the nose underneath this mandibles or this maxillary stuff here, straight back there. And so it's going to be on the inside portion of that. All right, the vomer is our next one. Looking at the diagram, the vomer is that yellow one. It's right below the green that you can see kind of on the far right of the diagram. So it's right below there, and it's one. I mean, it's kind of underneath this area, but it is kind of on the outside, and you can see the relationship to the teeth. So it's right above the teeth, just kind of right in here. Anyway, when we look at skulls, it's going to be, and if you're in Mrs. Wilson's CNA class, she's got a nice color coded skull and the vomer, and it can be taken apart and put back together, and the vomer is pretty easy to see, because when you take it apart, it's just kind of a flat, about this long, and it's just real thin, and it kind of sticks up in there like a tab A into tab B kind of a thing. But that's where it's on the outside of the nasal cavity, right above the teeth, just right in this area, but it goes straight back. But again, we'll look at skulls and pick it out. Okay, next up, the mandible portion of the jaw or the mouth, and that's, now we're talking about the lower part, the part that actually moves up and down. It's hinged back in here. Okay, with those condylar processes and stuff, and this is one that actually it's got a lot of sections that we'll make sure that we understand. It's got the two nice foramens, the mental here in the front, and then the mandibulars here in the back, kind of on the body of it, or the part that goes up that will connect to or be attached to by tendons or cartilage, to kind of hold that in place. And we'll look at the names of the parts there, but it's in that picture right there. But as we talk about it, the three parts, the part, if you just kind of put the part that goes up and down, that's the body, and then it angles a little bit, transitioning into a parallel to the ground section. That's called the angle, which is oddly named. And of course the body, that's the part that's the straight here, that's parallel to the ground, that supports the teeth. That's the body. So you got the I think I said body the first time. Ramus is the up and down part, the angle, and then the body part is where the teeth set. All right, and one last part. And I mentioned the mandible forum. They're here in the back, on the inside, and then of course the mental foramen are here in the front. And of course that condylar process, that's the part that is the oval knobs there. You can see them in the diagram there, on the back. They've got a little cartilage on them because they're going to be rotating, and just to save the wear and tear so you don't have bone on bone. And anyway, that's the part that's kind of, when we look at a skull that's got both parts, it actually stays together. There's like little knobs that just kind of set in a orbit, so it can hinge up and down. And of course, when they got the muscle attached and in a fully developed organism, you can control that movement up and down and side to side for obviously the chewing process and things like that. All right, our last thing to talk about, and this isn't so much because it's part of the skull, but it is kind of attached, or it leads away from the bones in the skull, and that's the things here in the neck. The larynx area, that's the part that's the windpipe. If you take that, kind of give it a little squeeze, it changes my voice when I'm talking. But we got that. But what we're really after is that hyoid bone that's at the very, very top, and you can see that. Now, the diagram in the diagram, when it shows you the picture of the hyoid bone kind of pulled away there, they've kind of flipped it over to where you can see the lesser horns, but in actuality, the lesser horns would be what goes into little spaces on the larynx to kind of hold it in place or anchor it in place to keep it moving there. So that's that little protection. You can kind of feel it You can get down lower than that. You can feel where the larynx is, but right at the very top, you can kind of feel that hyoid bone in there. And our last thing to talk about for the skull is the infant version of a skull, and some things that you've probably heard is, you don't want to touch a lot or do a lot with an infant skull, because they're very soft. Their bones are soft, and one of the reasons for that, I shouldn't say reason, but benefits of that is with the birthing process. That's obviously the widest thing that's going to come out, for lack of a better term, and without getting too descriptive there. But it's the idea, you want a little compaction there to be able to make that as helpful as possible. They are soft, and you can see the fontanelles there. Kind of looks like webbing, kind of a thick webbing, but it kind of gives it some cushion. And eventually that will harden and into the sutures themselves, as those sections of the skull kind of grow a little bit. But they are softer. For one, they need to continue to grow. Obviously, the size of an infant head is much different than an adult head, so they have to grow. So they can't just be hardened bone and do that. So just like regular bones, as they're growing, they're not fully developed yet. But that's one reason why you hear that, the soft spots on the infant skull, or be careful with the infant skulls, because they are softer, and they developed, and you can see the years there, the ages of the various levels of development. Well, that brings us to the end of our talks on the skull. When we get together next time, we're talking about the vertebrae. We'll see you then.